everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming. We are so excited to see such a great turnout. We really appreciate your patience as we navigate this very full room. My name is Nancy Reka. I am with Highland Planning, and we are part of the project team for this Region Central project. I just want to tell you a little bit about how the evening is going to run. So we are going to hear a presentation from the project team, giving you an overview of the project and an overview of what you're going to see in the remainder of the evening. Then we'll have a slight pause where you can stretch your legs, get a cookie, use the restroom, step outside, whatever, while we reposition the chairs, because then we will have five stations that you can visit at your leisure. At each of 4 of the stations, there's a scenario, a possible scenario for the future of the Skagit corridor. And then in the lobby, there's one station that is all about the community goals and how we're evaluating all the scenarios in order to see how to move forward. So you will get the general overview here. If that's enough for you, that will conclude the official portion of our presentation tonight, and you feel free to go home or feel free to move around to the stations. All of you should have a comment form. If you don't have a comment form, please let somebody know and we will get you one. This is how we are getting your feedback tonight. So we really would love for you to fill in those blanks, fill out the back of the page if you wish, and leave that at the registration desk before you leave. We have a little goodie for you when you leave. We will be having a repeat of this presentation upstairs at 6:30 if anyone that you know is still coming along and isn't here in time for this one. Is that it? Okay, well, with no further ado, thank you again for coming. I'm going to turn it over to Hal Morse, who's the director for this project.
Thank you and good evening again. And just very briefly in 2 minutes, I wanted to introduce the project and how this came about. I am Hal Morse, I'm project manager for this Region Central initiative at Buffalo Niagara Regional Transportation Council. We're the designated metropolitan planning organization for Western New York. This organization represents governments and agencies in Buffalo Niagara region, and we're charged with planning. We're charged with planning for transportation and prioritizing of projects for funding. As many of you remember, the Skagit Expressway project has been previously studied for a number of years. It was one of the first projects I worked on when I first got here about 20 years ago. No consensus on a project was ever achieved, though. And in 2018, the project stopped. And at that point, the governor and the state transportation commissioner turned to us at GBNRTC as we are viewed as an impartial, regionally focused organization with good technical skills. So we were then charged with picking this up, moving it forward. State Transportation Commissioner noted that the new planning process that we're engaged in will engage the public to define the future of the area and the optimal transportation system for it. We also appreciate the support from our elected officials at the local, state, and federal level who have provided great leadership in representing our area. We engaged a world-class consulting team led by Stantec, who you'll hear from shortly, to bring new perspectives and share the successful approaches to this project like they have done around the nation. We recognize and are encouraged by changes in our area. As we see growth in population and the transformation of our economy, we see a brighter future for Western New York. Advances in technology are an important component of that economic revival and also offer an opportunity to rethink our transportation systems for the future. Our mission here is to think about how we want to live, not only in the next couple of years or the next decade, but how to best serve our area for generations to come with excellent transportation infrastructure services. With that, we are turning over to David Dixon, who is representing the project team from Stantec.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I'm now going to see if I can successfully advance a slide, which a consultant is supposed to be able to do. Anyway, hello, while we're figuring that out, it is great to see all of you. And I'm the David Dixon, I lead the consulting team. And whether I have a slide to support me or not, I do have a couple of key messages. And the first is that, and the most important message is that when the Skidjacata was planned in the 1950s, one could say it made a whole lot of sense, given what this region was about. It had starting to go into economic decline. A lot of folks were moving to suburbs. A lot of jobs were being lost to suburbs. There was a great deal of concern about, well, can we get folks from the suburbs into the core of the city? That world has very much changed. It is now actually downtown and great urban neighborhoods like those in Region Central that really, no pun intended, drive the success not only of the city, but of the region. This is where economic growth and investment comes. Secondly, how do I say this? When the Skidjacata was planned, nobody ever stopped and asked the people who lived in the neighborhood through which an expressway was going, would you like this? It just wasn't part of the lexicon at that point. In fact, very few people were asked if they wanted something like this. It was viewed as absolutely necessary for the survival of the city. Going forward, it is really important, as Hal said, we're in a period where mobility and technology changes are coming, where our economy has changed, our demographics. Actually, I'll throw out one. Over the next 20 years, 80+% of net new households in this region, every other region, are going to be singles and couples without kids. And guess where they want to live? In great urban, walkable, mixed-use, diverse neighborhoods. They don't care about whether they can get there on an expressway or not. They care about whether they can walk to a park, walk to the Skidjacata Creek, walk to a really cool neighborhood store, run into people who are different from them, because that makes them feel like they're part of a real world. So none of these qualities are supported by having an expressway through your neighborhood. Not surprisingly, we're not the only ones having a meeting like this, maybe even tonight. Just like malls are closing across this country, expressways are coming down across this country so that we can, and these are all in cities that care about mobility and transportation and access, but so they can address it in a 21st century manner. One other number to remember is that less than 20% of the cars that get on at one end of the expressway get off at the other end. It really is a roadway serving you, the neighborhoods who live here, not so much the region. Hence why Hal and GBNRT's decision to create a locally based planning process who participated largely by those who actually host the expressway was a really brilliant idea, but also makes sense in the most traditional way. You're the ones who actually use the expressway in addition to living with it. Let's see if I can.
Remote there.
Oh yeah, thanks. So what GBNRTC and RTC did was define this area called Region Central, which are the neighborhoods that host the expressway. Economically, racially, and in many other ways, this is a very diverse set of neighborhoods, all of whom, because boy, we have been talking to lots of you, share some very clear values. A, you do want access to parks, to recreation. B, you do not want to host a lot of traffic-related fumes and other things that reduce public health. 3, you basically would like to be able to come together as neighborhoods, not be separated. And it spills on from there. But none of what we've heard, and I mean this very seriously, and certainly you didn't start with this impression, suggests that anybody has said, boy, we want an expressway running through our neighborhoods. When they talk about you talk about what you want for your neighborhoods. So I don't think we need to go in detail through. Let me just say, this border is porous. So we don't just say one side of that line matters, the other doesn't from this study. We'll talk to anybody who wants to talk to us. And obviously there are people who have opinions right outside as well as in. Oh, I know, I need to add one other thing. You host some really wonderful institutions, the zoo, the art museum, Buff State. You might think that these institutions say, oh, we need this expressway so folks can get to our institution. They don't. They have all said the same thing you all say, and some of they might be you in this room, which is we want a great, livable, vibrant, live, work, play, learn, arts, culture, rich neighborhood. And we want to be good neighbors, which we really appreciate. So to advance. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Jeff. But what this has done, if you look at these first three boxes, this represents 20 years of engagement that kind of ground to a halt. We're now starting with community goals. That was what was missing. And since you are not both the hosts and the predominant users of this expressway, this is a great place to be doing this planning now. And Jeff, thank you. Look forward to your comments.
Thank you, David. My name is Jeff Salzer. I'm project manager for Stantec and the consultant team. And so I wanted to pick up where David left off and just place tonight in the context of the overall project. So we've been working on this for over a year. And so we really want to emphasize the groundwork we've done, the due diligence, the engagement done to date, both engaging with that 20-year history of planning in the corridor and surrounding neighborhoods, a lot of baseline analysis, technical analysis, review of past plans. Importantly, with the review of past plans, also an accounting of the parallel initiatives, the other things that other organizations, agencies, the city are planning in this area so that there's synergy between our plans and what else is being proposed and done and executed in the corridor. And very extensive stakeholder engagement, a series of meetings that used to be virtual. We're really happy to be here in person tonight. Stakeholder interviews with a number of the institutions, many of you in the room probably here too throughout this process, pop-up events and other outreach, just trying to hear as much as we can from the folks in this room. And so combining those things, the past history of the project, the baseline analysis, and the engagement, we've come up with a set of community goals, which I'll be out in the lobby to talk about later after the presentation. These community goals seek to really broaden the perspective in this conversation. It's not just about transportation, it's also about inclusive economic development and equity. It's about replenishing the parks, parkways, and waterways, and effective local and regional mobility in all senses of the word, across modes, transit, bikes, pets. So we're trying to take a holistic approach here. Importantly, these goals are both informing the scenarios that you see around the room tonight, which Ralph will talk about in a minute. We're also using these goals and a series of metrics, which we'll talk about in a second, to evaluate the scenarios. So we understand how each is performing relative to these goals. And I'll talk about how we break that down. From these four scenarios that we look at tonight, we'll do that evaluation and then come back to present that evaluation with you. We want you to share in that process. Ultimately, we'll come up with a preferred scenario, which in all likelihood is a hybrid, pulling what's working, what's best from each of these scenarios. It's not a question of pick your favorite one. This is all a testing process to get to that better scenario, which we think will do the best job of realizing those broader community goals. And that will be presented, and Ralph will explain a little bit about how that will be delivered at the end of the process. So just to take a step back about those community goals, we think these are really important. We spent a lot of time developing them. We had a public meeting about these a few months ago also, so we're kind of recapping that now. So we're looking at the corridor of these scenarios through three lenses, as we call them. So effective local and regional mobility, replenished parks, parkways, waterways, and places, and enhanced equity and inclusive development. Each of those roll down to a set of metrics that are measurable, at least qualitatively. We have 39 metrics total. In mobility, we're looking at categories of access, choice, and character. For parks and parkways, we're looking at identity and heritage, natural assets, park systems, neighborhoods. And then on the economic development front, job growth and connections to jobs, housing affordability, safe neighborhoods, productive land use, fiscal growth. So I hope you appreciate that we're really trying to take a broader view, a comprehensive understanding of what Region Central is all about, what can make it successful, and how the future of this corridor can feed into those goals. So I invite you to come talk to me more about that. I've got all the metrics here. I'd love to walk through them with you and tell you more about that. But now I think back to the scenarios themselves, Ralph will take over from here. So thank you very much.
Just advance with this. And hi, everybody. I'll talk into the microphone. I'm Ralph Tedesco, Senior Principal at Stantec. I'm the lead mobility expert, consultant, person, whatever you want to call it, for this effort. It's been a real pleasure to work with everybody here in Region Central and in Buffalo throughout this process. I get to tell you a lot about the boards that are around the room and what you're going to be doing. But we wanted to put this slide back up here. And those of you who've been following along, in an earlier meeting back a few months ago, we presented something called the Mobility Experiential Guide to the Corridor. That's online. There's a bunch of examples around. And what we were able to do is take a different look at how people are getting around Region Central, who's on the expressway, what they're using it for. We just picked some highlights here to show, and to remind folks of some of these things. And this is in addition to all of the traditional kind of background analysis and understanding that you would do anytime you're looking at making changes to the mobility system. And just a few headlines. One is that almost 2/3 of the trips that start in Region Central that are driving, if you anywhere in that map that David showed you, are only going 5 miles or less. And that begs a different kind of transportation system. We've heard that from a lot of folks. You need to be able to walk better. There needs to be more bicycle facilities. There needs to be more transit. There needs to be more everything. You also heard David mention, only 20% of the people that are on the expressway are riding it from one end to the other, right? And that's in one direction. In the other direction, it's 8%. So and this is why we did this kind of analysis and really wanted to bring this to the community, is to meet the perception of everybody's just driving through here. That is not the case. It very much functions as a local access road. People from Region Central and surrounding neighborhoods come to the Scajaquada and then use it to distribute to other regional roadways, right? That's the pattern of what we see. And again, even when we looked at some of the top destinations, and you would think, oh, everybody's coming to the zoo is on the expressway. They are not, right? Some are, right? And we have to understand that. But we tried to bring a lot of this information to bear just as kind of background. Let's go to the next slide here. And, I think as Hal said too, the mobility landscape is rapidly evolving. Just look at in the last 5 to 10 years. And as with all other technology, those things are ramping up even further. The landscape is changing. There's new innovative options emerging, scooters, on-demand transportation, connected and autonomous vehicles. It's our job here to not just plan for today, but to plan for that mobility future and how that's going to impact all of the various ways that people are going to get around and what the expressway corridor and the rest of the mobility system in Region Central does or doesn't do. We're going to make decisions now that are going to affect the opportunities for those things to emerge and serve you in the way they want to be served. And we have to really think about them critically as we move forward here. So the main point of tonight is these 4 scenarios that we've developed. We've taken all of the information, all of the things that folks have said, all of the background work that people have done, and developed 4 different approaches, right? Which we're calling scenarios to what could happen on the Scajaquada Expressway corridor, right, writ large, and then within Region Central. And I want to be very clear. Tonight, we are not asking you which one you like, right? This isn't, American Idol or Masked Singer. We're not asking you to vote. What we're really asking you to do is understand them. Make sure that at least in one of these, we're reflecting the kinds of things that you personally and the people you represent want to see in Region Central and on the Scajaquada, because we're going to evaluate them against the goals that Jeff was talking about, right? 39 things plus, which are what you care about. And you care about a lot of things in Region Central, and they don't all agree with each other. So we're going to, once we get your feedback on these scenarios, test them against those metrics and tell you, you get a lot of this, but you also got to deal with that, right? That's what we come back with, right? And we're not, equivalizing kind of what each of those things are. And again, the end result of this process is a design approach, not a specific design. If you want to know if there's going to be 2 left turn lanes in a 27-second signal cycle at this intersection, that's not what we're doing. We're going to come out of this process with, we're going to start a design process for something that looks like this, that we all agree is what we want, right? That's where we're going. There's 4 scenarios. I'm going to talk through them a little bit. They're listed here. I've got a slide for each of them. Spend time going around the room, looking at each of them, asking questions, get up into the details. And for each one, there's 2 things you really have to pay attention to. Can you hear me? I move away from the mic sometimes. The first, which is shown on the left here, is the approach to the expressway corridor itself, which we're sort of defining as kind of the road and the creek and maybe 50 feet on either side of it, right? We tried to think through what you would do along the whole stretch in each of these approaches. And then the second which are really important, are supporting elements, right? If you are going to do any of these scenarios, here's all the other stuff that you should also do in Region Central to accomplish the goals that you're trying to accomplish. And we're talking about transit improvements, we're talking about bicycle improvements, we're talking about policy changes, we're talking about, in some cases, maybe this, that, or the other thing. Your traffic used to go here and it's going to go over here, and you got to understand that, right? So we've tried to think that through for each of the scenarios, the other stuff that you would also do. Do we have it 100% right? No. I'm telling you, no, we don't, right? We're going to test these and we'll find out, well, maybe we also have to do A, B, or C. That's exactly what we're going to get to. Let me just talk a little bit about each of these scenarios. And they're going to go in order, and I'll try, if I can, to point around the room to where they are. The status quo plus here is essentially a scenario where we're exploring an option where you're essentially maintaining the current function of the expressway, but improved, right? You would still have something that looks like it does today. We'd fix many of the safety issues at the ramps, right? We'll try to add some more connections. You can go into the details there, but it would still be a limited access highway that sort of looks and feels and operates the way that it does today. It maintains that kind of sub-regional connectivity that I was talking about. People use it to go to the other places. But then it also opens up lots of other possibilities on the other surrounding roadways and networks that we would talk about. Those are listed here in the supporting elements. The second, which is back here, we're calling the at-grade roadway. On some of them are materials. We might be calling it a boulevard. In this scenario, we're testing an approach where there would still be a road that would run from the 190 to the 33, but it would look much more like a regular street, right? Like another street that you're used to seeing here. There would still be a connection, but it wouldn't be a highway that would run through there. You'd have typical intersections, not on and off ramps at each of those locations. And frankly, at this level, we're saying it could be 1 lane in each direction. It could be 2 lanes in each direction. I think that's the kind of thing we still want feedback on, because whether it's 1 or 2 lanes certainly has mobility implications, but it has implications for all of the other things that we care about, for creek access or the amount of park that you can get, or how you feel around it, or any of those things, right? So that's the kind of feedback we want for each of those. The third scenario, which we're calling partial removal, and that's in the back over here, is a lot like the at-grade solution, except within Delaware Park, there is no road, right? So you'd still have a road that would run and connect to the 33 and the 190, but then they would stop at the edges of Delaware Park, and then within Delaware Park, the road would be replaced by what we're calling a shared use path. I'm gonna move from beyond the microphone. Something that kind of looks like that, right? Maybe it's bigger, maybe it's wider, maybe it's 2 of them, I don't know, right? But that's the kind of thing that would replace the roadway within Delaware Park. And it would have no cars would be allowed. And then the last scenario is a full expressway removal, right? So this would essentially be, there would be no road, there would be no expressway. So in the area that exists today, the creek, access to the creek would continue to exist. There would be some kind of shared use path that would run the length of it. Again, lots of opportunities about what that could look like and how that would feel, but all of the functionality that's served by the corridor today would have to be served in other ways. Right? Again, we don't have all the answers today. There's much work that has gone into kind of coming up with these scenarios, trying to get them to reflect at least the range of things that we've heard from people throughout this process, and then to think through the supporting elements that it would take in order for that approach to the corridor to function and achieve all the other things that you're trying to achieve within Region Central. So if you're able to do all 4 of these and read all that stuff and still get out of here on time, I'm very impressed by all of you. It'll be online afterwards as well, and we'll still be accepting comment. And we want comments in all forms. I don't understand this. I want more information about this. Yeah, I like this part of this. Make sure you that's the kind of feedback that we're looking for here. And with that, I think, Hal, I turn it back to you, correct? No, I think you, then Nancy.
All right, we're about ready to go to the stations and look at and discuss some things. Probably a question arises in terms of what happens next. And so this project is moving forward with the reveal of these 4 scenarios tonight. We're working to complete the planning process probably late this summer. So we'll get the combined scenario, bring it back out, review it with everybody again, and see if we're close to consensus then. This process is different than have you seen before. As you've noticed tonight, it's not a traditional traffic study. The plan recognizes that solutions are more than just one road, as mentioned, so they can include surrounding streets, other roadways in the area. How do we interface with those and accommodate it? The cost to maintain our infrastructure is significant. So we're also looking at, are we getting the value for the infrastructure that we have or that we're going to have in terms of what it costs us to maintain and further develop that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Hang on. Now, talk a little more.
Okay.
There.
So these recommendations, as we finish the planning process, will be then sent to the state of New York, who asked us to complete this initiative, and they will be input to the actual design process. That will actually then go back out again for further comment, as Ralph mentioned, with specific details that people can look at and understand. Regarding the project itself, this shows up in our regional transportation plan already as a project, and funding has been tagged for a part of this project. Pending final design, it may require different amounts of funding. And this is a very opportune time because new federal legislation reflects these kinds of projects very specifically. And we're already building a funding matrix, if you will, that takes existing funding plus other fund sources that'll help us get to a way to completely fund and deliver this project. So again, thanks for coming out tonight. I really appreciate this opportunity to have everybody engaged. We've been doing this for a year now. We're looking for ways to bring everybody together, find some kind of consensus and move this project forward. So again, I would turn it back to how we're going to review these at the stations. And again, appreciate you turning out.
That concludes our presentation tonight. As Nancy said, we need to do a little bit of reconfiguring for some chairs and seating to open up the space in front of the stations. So feel free to stretch your legs, like Nancy said, take a step outside, grab some more coffee or cookies, and